Hello, everyone. I'm here with Jeremy. He's an aerospace engineering student. We study together, and he's a great friend. So I'm introducing him here to this HV show. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
All is going all right?
Good, good.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
So we have gathered here in this beautiful park to just talk about how the cultural difference has affected both of us in some way, I would say.
Sure.
Like my transition from India to the United States was a big transition,
Absolutely.
and it took a lot of efforts, I would say, in terms of settling in. And you'd be surprised to know, maybe not really, but it took me 8 days to get settled into the time zone because I jumped so many while moving across the globe.
Right. And I believe during that same time we were taking a trip, or about to at least take a trip. So yeah, that was kind of a big deal. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, okay. And today we are aiming this podcast to be about adapting to the American culture.
Yep.
And who better than you to talk about the American culture since you have been born and brought up here?
Right.
So let's begin by some initial experience that I have, and then you can maybe give me a better idea on whether I am right on that front or not.
Sure.
So I'll tell you what, let me begin by saying the question that is asked the most number of times to me is what is the culture shock that I have faced
Right.
in the US? And my answer always has been none, really, because I worked with people from the US virtually with my startup. So I knew what I was getting into, if that makes sense. And I knew how people talked.
Sure.
I knew how people would behave, how a professional setting would be.
How long did you do that?
I'd say about 7 months, in particular with the people from the US.
Okay.
Not just the US, but more like people from Canada and Switzerland, people who...
Culturally fairly similar.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that gave me a brief understanding of what the country is like culture-wise. But I also got to know a lot more about the culture when I got to the States. One thing that I found really interesting was the use of English units. I still remember the day I went to Walmart. My very good friend took me there for the first time, second day in the United States. And I am a fan of fruit juices. So I just wanted to pick up some. I grab a bottle, and there's something written on it, which is FLOZ. What is that? What's OZ? Yeah, and then he explained me that's fluid ounces. I'm like, why don't you just have a metric system, the SI one, right? So maybe that was like my experience.
Sure.
But
I think there was even another time when we were together in a store where there was little things like, hey, this is kind of the culture with this type of
yeah, no.
just like I'm sure in India, there's different areas have different culture in India. You have the same thing here. We really do. Like there's, if you go to the deep south, you're going to have a typically very conservative culture. Whereas if you're on, say, the West Coast or even New York on the northeast coast, you're going to have more on that liberal side and different views on the world, different culture in general.
And it is such a vast country,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I can definitely vouch for that because I have heard from other American friends
Yep.
that the East Coast and the West Coast is polar opposite.
Yep.
Like, I don't remember which one, and I definitely don't want to pick sides, but I have heard that one of the either is much nicer and kinder.
It just depends. Yeah.
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 Maybe it just depends on the people, I guess.
I think so. I think earlier today we talked about kind of how I think humans in general have kind of a tribal nature where their tribe is the good one,
Yeah.
and others that don't grow up like them, or maybe not quite as good or whatever. And I think you do see that a lot in even our own country. You see that between different between different racial groups and between different political groups and even religious groups, and even amongst non-religious, not any of those. You see those cultural differences, and some people don't, when they don't understand something, they see it as somehow an attack on their culture. And so it happens here. I'm sure it happens elsewhere too, but
No, I couldn't agree more. And there's a very good example for that I can give.
Yeah.
Is that I describe America as this godly place that I am in. And, really, to be really honest, and the most welcoming place I have been. Of course, I don't count India in it because I have born and brought up there, so it's home for me. Sure. But other than India, moving out from India, I think U.S. is like another home for me. And the way you said it, I agree with that, because even in the same place, in the same university, I know other people from other countries, international students, who don't feel it the same way.
Right.
And when I said it, they were so strongly opposing me. They're like, what? What are you saying? How come it is such a welcoming state?
Right.
But maybe it is just so subjective an experience where...
sometimes that's the case. You just meet certain people that you click with, and some people you don't. I think there's a lesson to be learned in that, of course. Not to judge a book by its cover, always. But I don't know. To be honest, if we would have hit it off so well, had we not almost immediately when you got here, had that trip together, we laughed and we had so much fun, and we did so much stuff. We even had our professors laughing hysterically. We stayed up till who knows when in the morning.
I still do remember these guys made me watch a show, which I didn't expect at all. And our professor was staying in the adjacent room, and I, Jeremy, and our dear friend Christian, who was presenting at that very conference, so we all three were staying in the other room. And these guys decided to make me watch a TV show that is broadcasted in the States. A comedy one. And it was so funny that I just fell off the bed, and I was on the floor laughing and rolling like a crazy person.
At 1 o'clock in the morning or something.
At 1 in the morning, and Christian just paused the show. He closed the TV, and he goes, "Well, get your shit together. What are you doing?" And it's like, we have our professor next door.
George is right there.
Yeah, that was real fun. And I still do remember the first time I saw you, where we had that AIAA meeting, and you're walking with your girls, 2 daughters, and you're walking with someone else, and you were talking about something, and you had that sense of humor, and I was laughing about that, and you said something to the other person. I was just third wheeling behind you guys. I'm like, that's funny. That he looks like a man who has a sense of humor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you'll find that a lot here. There's a lot of people that, there's a lot of stress, like anywhere else, I'm sure, but there's a lot of stressors in America. And so you'll find a lot of people that want to break that with humor.
I think the wind is going crazy. I am enjoying this setting, really. I hope it doesn't mess with our audio. Yeah. Of course, and maybe that is a good way to segue into the cultural differences that we see between U.S. and India.
Sure.
And I think the very big one that I see, and of course, before diving deep into the cultural differences, let me put out what I think about it, which is that there is nothing to compare. You cannot compare cricket with football. It's something like that, right? Oranges and apples. Right. So I have learned this, that every culture has its pros and cons. And when there are times when people in India would say that Indian culture is better, or people in the States would say our culture is better, I really don't agree with that ideology, because I think it is too different to compare in the first place. Absolutely. And it's so interesting that what happens when you live with your parents for all of your life, and you grow up with them, you have a job, and you're living with them, and you get married, and you're living with them, and you have kids, and you are still living with them, and they will live until they pass, and then you will live with your kids and your children until you pass, and that just goes on and on. Versus where in the States you are 16 or 17 and you are so much motivated to stand on your own feet and you leave your parents' house to provide for yourself and make a living. And it is so interesting to me that no side will ever know what happens if you were, to end up on the other side. Because the way I have been brought up and the day I'm seeing right now, I cannot imagine what would have happened if I was here in the States and I was, I left the house and I did something for myself.
I think that's important to recognize that, who's to say one way or the other is better. In my case, I actually stayed in my parents' home a little longer than the normal because I did go to college for some medical stuff before. But I left the house when I was, I believe 24 is when I left the house, and moved out on my own. And, that was a huge step for me in becoming, I guess what we would say, a man or whatever, and becoming who I needed to be. But I could see how in a different culture where you just stay in your family home, how there's a different cultural aspect on what it means to be that caregiver of the household or what have you. And who's to say which one's better? It just is different.
It is very different. And I see that, especially because we both are in school pursuing aerospace. I see that a lot in school where the mindset and the approach to life is so different for the people in school in America versus in India, because every penny that they have provided to the school as the tuition fee is earned by themselves, or they are in debt, financial, like educational loan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it is so different in India because mostly the parents pay for the entire education of a kid.
Sure.
So I can only imagine how that would change your perspective towards being in a class, where you are so aware and conscious of the fact that you are paying every dime for it.
You realize that every class you're in is so much money that you're spending. Yeah, there's a difference in how you might look at that. But I still think even having said that, I'm a non-traditional student here, which in the States means that I'm back in school, not right out of high school. I've taken time. I have a family. I had a business for a while, and so on and so forth. And I went back to school, so that's considered being a non-traditional student. And being a non-traditional student, I see that perspective probably more than a traditional student does. Because, when you're young, at least here in the States, I don't know how it is elsewhere, not a lot is talked about as far as how you deal with finances. And that's something I am like a huge proponent of. I think we need to talk more financial awareness, like in middle school and high school and so on and so forth. But I think it just doesn't happen as much here.
I really want to take this time and mention a bit from a stand-up comics act that I watched quite recently, and he said that he started by saying that it was very difficult for him to date, and he didn't have those skills to find a partner and to impress her. And he goes, and that is not even taught to us in school, right? The most important skill for the existence of humanity.
How do you find somebody that's going to encourage you to and to meet your goals? Yeah,
really. And it was so funny when he mentioned that it is the most important thing in humanity to reproduce and to have the race running. Yep. It is not taught in school versus what I'm taught in school. How to extract aluminium from the bauxite ore. Like, what am I going to do about the bauxite ore when I'm 24? So when you were talking about finances, that made me think about it. But really, that is the case elsewhere as well. I can vouch for that there is the other podcast series and the new social media's intervention to bring awareness is really about that quite a few times when they discuss how you should be taught about managing finances and having insurance policies, not when you are alive, but when you are dead and your family gets money. Things like those where you are just taught how to make money from money. That is a big skill that people don't have and many don't even realize.
Well, and I think it's all too easy to look to now. What pleasures can I bring from life right now, and we don't think about the future and what the future might hold. And in some ways, both intellectually, financially, and otherwise, putting some aside for later. Doing something for the future, and that's what honestly we're doing right now. I'm doing it a little later in life than you are, but I'm paying a price right now to go to school and do what I've always wanted to do. Yeah. And to be honest, it's not always been easy. In fact, this last semester really hit me hard, and we had some family situations and different things that, it was tough. It was very difficult, and we're still trying to work through a lot of that stuff. So when you have that happen, if you're still in the mindset of what brings me pleasure right now, it's really easy to quit. It's really all too easy to just say, forget it. I'll just do this and I'll whatever. But yeah, it's really important to look to the future and to build something for later.
Really, I would agree to that ideology where, and I think we talked about this on a phone call, where you really need to forget about the present in a way that you are, of course, working in the present and you're living in the present, but you know how that affects your life 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line. Absolutely. And everything is taken into account. Yeah. And then you approach your life in that manner. I completely agree.
It's fascinating because this podcast specifically is talking about, adapting to American culture. Right. But there's things in the process that we're talking about that honestly, I think we could glean from your culture. Like, while I personally don't know that I would have wanted to stay with my parents for very long, to me that sounds horrible. But
yeah, to almost every American I have noticed.
To me, I'm just like, nah, get rid of that. But at the same time, I'm sure there's cultural influences in there that do look to the future. Like, we're building an ongoing system that is going to take care of our kids, our grandkids, and so on and so forth forever. And there's definitely things I think we can learn from the Indian culture. And so I don't think this is just one-sided. I don't think it's just about learning American culture, but I know who the audience is, and I definitely understand that you want to see what we're all about. But definitely don't forget your heritage is all I gotta say. Don't forget that, because there's good things to glean from every culture.
That's a very good point. Interesting. Next, I'd really like to talk about more like integrating into the American culture and what it takes to just fit into the daily routine into an American culture.
Fun.
Yeah. And I can begin by saying a very novel experience that I had. And of course, everyone knows in India that this is not my Indian accent. I don't talk like this in India. Right. This is because I have learned to talk, or I'm trying to learn to talk in a way that Americans do, just to make everyone's life easier in the States. So I'll give you an example of why this accent. So I went into a combustion class. I got out of the class and I went into my lab. I was sitting there doing homework. One of my classmates, also a very good friend, came in and was asking about the homework. And I said, well, I did most of it, but I have a problem on the fifth question. And he goes, well, which one is the fifth question? And without even looking on our computers, I just answered, well, that has to do something with chemical kinetics. And he goes, sorry, what do you mean? And I said, chemical kinetic. And he goes, well, I'm sorry, but I don't understand. Can you explain me it any other way? So I had to think about it for a while. And I said, well, the rate of the reaction that we learned in the class. And he goes, well, you mean kinetics. And I used to say kinetic. So I'm not a stickler to that I come from India and I don't want to learn how they speak. Because if US has been kind enough to bring me in and to make my life better, I don't want other people to just assume what I say and ask every time on, hey, what did you mean there? So I try to learn how you speak. And
to be clear, if it was me going to India
Yeah.
in the same situation, I would absolutely do the same thing and try to assimilate to that culture as much as I could too. So I know there's a view of Americans as not being willing to, change their culture, and they want everybody else to just, become Americans in every way. But the truth is, a bunch of us, if we were to be in the reverse role, we would do the same thing.
Yeah, I'd really agree with that. And, things like schedule, like the D is pronounced in India. It's schedule. More like schedule. I can't even, like I've been here too long to know how they speak anymore.
It's like I'm from Minnesota, and in Minnesota we have a lot of Swedish people, and I'm actually almost full-blooded Swedish, and we talk very different. So in Minnesota, like this, yeah, and we would say, yeah, sure, you betcha, all the time. When we would talk about going out on the lake and on the boats, we would go tubing on the lake. Well, of course, anywhere else, you start talking like that, and they're looking at you like, who is this weirdo, right? Yeah. So, like, I could, because I'm from there, but I don't talk like I'm there anymore because I have spent a significant amount of time away from Minnesota. So as you go, you really pick up on the culture of where you're at. So obviously, just to be clear, we would say the same words, obviously, elsewhere in America, but we would, it wouldn't be with those drawn out vowels so much. So like in Minnesota, we say bag and everywhere else we say a bag.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. I've heard about this South accent that comes from Texas or maybe down south, which is like yawn.
Yeehaw, yes sir, yeah, and the long drawn out sentences, and there's definitely some people with some strong like southern, almost cowboy like accents. Yeah, you watch the cowboy videos and you kind of pick up on a little bit of that. So there's definitely some of that going around as well. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that was the first thing I thought of integrating into the American culture was accent. To just think about how you guys speak and to observe and learn. Will you believe me if I say that when I play video games with my American friends, I have a notepad with me and I note down what they say?
Oh, that's funny.
Because like we used to play this video game and we would have rounds and we'll be winning a round or losing a round. And I know what I would say in India if I was in India in Hindi or in English. But when I'm in India, I know what I would say. But it's very different here. Yeah. So I am here playing video games and then those guys are, come on guys, let's go. Pull it together. And we would use the slang terms, right?
Sure.
So I would have a notepad and I would, okay, pull it together. And like in one situation, then let's go. Then I'm playing with the same guys again, or with other guys, Americans, and I'd be like, come on, guys, we got this. Let's go. Pull it together.
And what's funny to us is we can actually tell when somebody is trying like that. There's sometimes when that happens and it becomes really funny because you realize the person is really trying to fit that mold that we have, but it's not quite there, but it's close, right? And you're just like, it gets really funny. Yeah. I love that. I love it.
So that's how I started to think about integrating into the culture. There's also this other thing that I always tell fellow international students is to make friends. Like there are a few that I know, international students, who would have problems with doing homeworks or just studying together because they wouldn't study together. Like they would find other Indian fellows, which I appreciate, and I do have Indian friends here. But because your class consists of maybe 40 people who are from America and 2 from India, you need help. You need classmates. You need people that you can work with or study with. Because if your plan is to work here after your study program, you are definitely going to work with American people. Mostly, you might have international people in there, but I really think of American people being in a work setting more than a school.
Sure.
And I think it's a very good practice to just be there. Like I stay with my American friends that I have made friends after we have stayed for quite a long time, and I have been to their houses, their parents' houses, and for Thanksgiving dinner, and their parents were very sweet.
How was the turkey? I'm just kidding.
I'm a vegetarian. And you know what happened that day?
Yeah.
On Thanksgiving, I did not know till that date what the turkey means. Like, I didn't know if that was an animal or a bird or something else, right? I of course knew that it was meat. It was non-veg. So I'm like, okay, I'll not have that. And when my friend invited me, like my housemate invited me, I just said that I don't want to trouble you guys with making extra vegetarian food for me, especially. And he goes, there's only turkey which is non-vegetarian. Everything else is vegetarian. But his mom and his dad were too sweet that they made extra vegetarian dishes for me, like an Indian dish. Awesome. She looked up a recipe on internet and she cooked an Indian dish for me.
Was it good?
Yeah, it was really good, And so what happened then was, I was sitting there and the ladies were preparing food. Yep. We all men are sitting in the living room watching TV, I think football. And the ladies are like, okay, let's have dinner. It's ready.
Right.
Okay, cool. Let's go. We come in the dining room and everyone's sitting there and it's like, okay, let's start. There's a buffet style where you just pick your plate and walk around. And his mom told me that you can have all of that, which is vegetarian. Yep. Don't have that because that's the bird, turkey. Oh, why didn't you say that? I did not want to know that.
The turkey bird.
My Thanksgiving would have been so much better. Why did you let me know that it is a bird, It was so interesting that I didn't know that it was a bird.
Yeah.
And once she said it, I had all those visuals. Oh my God.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a difference between cultures there as well, between meeting. I'm a meat eater personally. I love meat. So it doesn't bother me at all to think about what it was beforehand. But I do understand, from many different perspectives, whether it be ethical or dietary, different things of why you would go vegetarian. But personally, at the moment, based on the information I have, I've still decided to be a meat-eating person. So,
and I can vouch for the fact that it comes from different factors. Like, I definitely think that geography is a factor because India, with its terrain, doesn't need people to eat meat to stay warm because we don't have harsh weather. Like, Russia has the culture of having alcohol and the vodka that comes from there because there's like minus 50 degrees Celsius.
And it helps to not feel it.
And you stop feeling your legs all of a sudden and you're like, what's happening?
Yeah, where I'm from in Minnesota, it gets really, really cold too. And there's times when it's terribly cold. It's just horribly cold.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
And so I believe that the geography has also a role to play, along with maybe a religious role or a dietary, I guess.
Absolutely. Okay, but on that same, I wanted to move back a little bit, if you don't mind, on that same subject about making friends. I wanted to input a little bit there and say, you've got to, if you really want to be successful, especially here in America, you really need to work on being outgoing. I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm an introvert. I actually gain more energy. But
I can never believe that. He's lying. He's lying.
I literally am. I get more energy by being by myself, and then I expend my energy with my friends and stuff like that. But that being said, I have learned to act in a more outgoing / extroverted way. And I think Samarth has actually seen that on numerous occasions already. In fact, when we first met, we went down to the Mars Society conference in Arizona. And being that, I'm the events coordinator for the AIAA, it was my job to go meet these people and get them to come talk at UCCS. And I was successful on a number of them. Yeah. I mean, I would walk up to people that some people would just like, they would never think that those people would want to talk to them. And I just walk up to them and start talking to them. And some of those turned into, friendships. And I'm actually still in contact with a bunch of those people today. And that's a contact, It happened to, at UCCS, during one of the AIAA meetings, Trip Carter from Lockheed Martin, who's now the vice president of capture for Lockheed Martin Space. At the time, he had a different title, but it's same thing. I walked up to him, talked to him. After he spoke and such, we hung out a bit, and I asked him to mentor me, and he has, and he's my mentor now. And just those moments of just taking that chance. These people want to help. They really do. They want to help you, but they don't know how to help you if you don't ask.
I couldn't agree more, really.
Don't go talk to them. They don't know you exist. And people want to help. I want to help. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't want to help. It's such a big deal to just take that chance, walk up to somebody, stick your hand out, and say, "Hey, my name is," insert your name here, right? And just, it's amazing what that does, for you. In fact, I knew I was going to be coming to UCCS, but I was actually at a community college, which is a 2-year college here, doing some of my math stuff and chemistry and different things like that first. And I went to an AIAA meeting at UCCS prior to me becoming a student at UCCS. And I knew of Dr. George, but I didn't know who she was at the time. And I was sitting in the back, and I talked to somebody and I said, "Hey, who's Dr. George?" And they pointed her out for me. And then the speaker, who was the chief scientist for the Space Force.
Oh, wow.
He was speaking. And then after he spoke, I walked up to them, and it was him, Dr. George, and I believe a general of some sort was there. And I stood there, quietly because they were talking, and I didn't want to interrupt. And the general turned to me and said, "Hey, how can I help you?" And I said, "How's it going? Dr. George, my name is Jeremy," and I introduced myself. And from that small thing, I just said, "Hey, my name's Jeremy. I'm going to be coming here. How do I get involved with this?" From that, I got involved with the AIAA and Cool Science and multiple other projects. NASA GLEE, the Great Lunar Experiment, where we're now building something that is going to the moon right now, which is it's fascinating. All these little things from that one moment of me reaching out, and honestly, my interaction with Trip Carter, who is now my mentor, also technically kind of came from that as well. So take those chances. What are they going to say if they're not willing to help you?
Yeah, and there's an Instagram meme revolving around that fact.
Yeah.
Where a boy, like a friend, is helping other friend, be like, "Hey, just go up to that girl and ask her out."
Yeah.
What is the most she's gonna say? No. And he goes there, and she has the worst things to say. She's like, "I'd better remain single for all of my life than to date you," and horrible things.
It's a numbers game, guys. It's a numbers game. It's in the same thing with professional acquaintances as well. To an extent, it's a numbers game. But I find on a professional level, people to be much more willing to help than, say, a dating relationship or anything like that. It's really fascinating to me that I think I'm pretty much almost 100% for asking people to help me and them actually agreeing to help me.
Really?
Almost 100%. I wouldn't say 100%, but I'm pretty close. When we were down at the conference,
Dude, guys, I saw him, there's this happy-go-lucky Jeremy, and then cut to he's all professional, and he's like, "Hey, how you doing?"
Yep. Yeah. I love to laugh. I love to have fun, but there is a moment, there's a time where you have to switch roles and you have to be the professional. You have to be the person. And I think that's true in life. And that's true of you CEOs too. I have some inside information on certain very well-known people that may or may not be, the richest man in the world right now. That I have some inside information of people who have spent time with him specifically, and he was that way too. He laughed and joked and argued with people that he knew, but in front of the public or in a business situation, or when they're building something or when they're designing something, they're all business and they're the professional. So yeah, I mean, everybody loves to laugh. Everybody likes to have fun. Put yourself out there. I guarantee you'll be surprised on who you'll meet, who will be foundational for your future.
And I think this is a very good note to end our podcast here, concluding on just go out there, have fun, also be aware of the fact on how to merge yourself or integrate yourself into the culture, any culture that you are in right now, doesn't matter US or India or any other country. And I would definitely say that it is a conscious effort, because you are not born and brought up in the culture. You do need to go out. You do need to make friends. And
even for those of us that are in this culture, we still need to work on certain things like that, like where we need to put ourselves out there. And and not, as you know, not everybody's like me, right? Not everybody is. There's people that are just, that are, they're fun all the time. And they don't know how to turn on the business side of things, or vice versa. They're all business, and then they wear out. And
monotonic.
Yeah, very much so.
Right. So I think that's a very good end to this podcast. Thank you very much. I had Jeremy with me. Thank you again.